Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Bill K's Cockeyed Caravan, episode number 5, coming to you, as always, from the cozy confines of my movie studio apartment, ensconced comfortably in the hills in the wood of the holly under this sign. And once again, I'm here, and we've got a little break in the action. The action, by that I mean the action outside of the cozy confines. Somebody was sandblasting about a block away, making it impossible to record, but they've quit. And they've left a little window, and hopefully we'll get some quietude, and I can dive into the nether regions of my consciousness and hopefully shed a light into yours. And as I always do, I like to start just in the reactive mode, what's going on. And first and foremost, as he always does, he commands our attention, he assaults us, he overwhelms the best part of our brain, and it just so happens that ugliest of Americans, the most whose most malignant qualities have seemingly metastasized in one human form, that green-eyed gangster, the toxic little 70-year-old stuck in his terrible twos and let loose in the sandbox to terrorize us and destroy everything he sees, while his Republican enablers watch with a smirk on their face. He is struck again, and this time in a most dangerous way. By that I mean calling out with his little Twitter megaphone, calling out Iran. And once again, I think what we have here, you don't have to be a political scientist, you don't have to be from a major think tank to understand what's going on. This is a classic tale of the this is a classic, what would this be? A classic example of the tail wagging the dog, or the dog wagging the tail. I don't know, it's something to do with a dog and his tail, and I think the idea is when the dog is wagging his tail or the tail is wagging the dog, I think it is actually when the tail wags the dog. It is an expression designed to describe a situation where somebody is trying to divert our attention from a more imminent danger, at least to himself. And so once again, like I said, we have a classic example of the tail wagging the dog, as the PVP, that's Putin's vice president, has gotten on his little Twitter megaphone and called out Iran, or the ancient state of Persia. And either way, I think the reasoning and the rationing, like I said, is clear. After Helsinki episode, where the PVP met his handler, and I might add, Helsinki may end up replacing the term Munich as the benchmark for diplomatic humiliation. Once again, rather not Munich, but Helsinki. They're not far from each other. I think Helsinki is about 1,000 miles north of Munich, maybe less. Anyway, that was where the billionaire brat boy met his handler and was stripped naked and bullwhipped on the playground for everyone to see. So what is the humiliated bully? Tears running down his face. He's pouting. He's fearful that people will be able to look in and see his true self. He's got to pick a new fight. He's got to taunt an old boogeyman. And this time it's Iran. And for anybody actually who's read any history books, I prefer to call it Persia, home of the ancient peacock throne. But I don't think, in this case, the PVP realizes really who he's messing with. Because let's just talk about Iran. The first thing is, Iran is not a medieval kingdom awash in petrodollars that chops people's head off, keeps women in bondage, and coddles terrorists who flew passenger jets into buildings. That would be Iran's near neighbor, Saudi Arabia, where the PVP recently did a sword dance with an assorted gang of trillionaire princes. And by the way, I might add, billionaires are honor-bound to kiss the asses of trillionaires, just as millionaires are required to kiss the ass of billionaires, and the rest of us are honor-bound, supposedly, to kiss the ass of millionaires. So the billionaire went to kiss the ass of the trillionaires over in the kingdom of Saud, and we saw that. And now Iran is an ancient nation. It's got a nation with a proud history that predates our own nation by centuries. And Iran is not a kingdom. It is a somewhat more evolved political organism. It is an Islamic republic with, yes, a difficult cleric-led regime that I'm not here to defend, but there is in Iran, ancient Persia, a serious country there to be reckoned with. And if you want to understand why these religious clerics are running things, why don't you check out the name, and this is not to the public, although those of you that are listening, you might want to do this. Check out the name Mossadegh. You want to understand the Middle East? Read about Sykes and Picot, and those were the two guys that drew up the map that is today's Middle East during World War I. And as they carved up the Ottoman Empire with all these new boundaries, those are the very same boundaries that we're honoring today, we're fighting wars for. And they were boundaries by hopeful imperialist nations that were imposing their nationalist ideal into an area that was then and still is now really animated or controlled by tribal allegiances. And that's what we're seeing in Syria and other places. Even Saudi Arabia was essentially a tribe who was elevated to the status of nation state and a kingdom. So you want to understand these areas. Let's take a look back into history. One recommendation is rewatch Lawrence of Arabia. It's all in there. Everything you need to know about the current situation is, frankly, it's in that movie. And the keys to understanding the present, specifically in Iran today, are always found in the past. And so, for example, find out what happened in 1953 when the CIA boys, the newly formed CIA actually, fresh off the energized by their victory in World War II, led by Schwarzkopf's dad, yes, Norman Norman's dad of the Gulf War fame, his father, and Teddy Roosevelt's son, they went down to Iran and reinstalled into power the Shah, who had fled to Paris. And they reinstalled the Shah at the expense of the democratic leader who I believe I mentioned a moment ago, Mossadegh, whose sole crime was he wanted to renegotiate the oil deal with BP, British Petroleum. And when that went south, he took the what's seemingly radical step of choosing to nationalize Iranian oil, which inflamed the fears of the American Republican administration at that time. I believe it was Eisenhower. And they were concerned that Mossadegh and his democratically elected followers had fallen into the communist orbit, and they had the highest duty to go to Iran and reinstall the Shah. He came back from Paris and was put into power. That was the peacock throne, Mr. Pahlavi, and they ruled into the Iranian Revolution of 1981. And I think an excellent book, by the way, if you ever really want to read this narrative, and it sheds an incredible light on the world that we're in today, specifically with Iran and the Middle East, check out All the Shah's Men. It's a great book which tells an incredible story, which I think also would make a great movie. So, Iran, Persia, this little block of country with the Caspian Sea up there in the north, bordering Russia. It's a country with a beautiful culture, incredible art, a fanatical love of poetry, although I'm not crazy about the music, I'm sorry. And they have a blessed cuisine that has massively enriched the city I live in, Los Angeles. All you have to do is drive down Westwood or Ventura Boulevard, look for that cursive Arabic script on any restaurant sign, and you can bet your last dollar that inside is kebab heaven and saffron-infused rice served directly from the gods. So, that's, in a nutshell, Iran. A troubled but proud country with a massively deep history. And so my message to the billionaire brat boy who is surely not listening to the PvP, shut the F up. You don't know anything. Iran is not the country we should be humiliating or castigating. Iran is the country we should be reaching out to. Iran is the country that we should be hosting cultural exchanges with. We should rejoin that nuclear treaty which he trashed and, frankly, apologize. You want to bring down the price of energy? Drop the sanctions. We don't need to cozy up to a bunch of goofball clerics, in Iran, but we do need to open doors, explore fears, show some respect. You want to talk the great game of geopolitics, look at the frigging map. Old Winnie the Pooh Churchill, he could tell you, Iran is the cork on the Russian bottle. Iran holds the keys to the Straits of Hormuz. All traffic that goes in and out of the Persian Gulf is looked over by Iran. And as a further note, you want to see some great acting? You want to see some great directing? Check out Asghar Farhadi's The Salesman, or better yet, the movie that preceded The Salesman, Separation, which, in my opinion, by any standards, is a cinema masterpiece. Okay, that's my rant about the latest tweet. Hopefully we don't have to take it seriously. Truth be told, this goofball, I don't like to call him the PvP, is drowning in his own shit. There is so much coming at him from so many directions, all of his own making, that the poor bastard can't think. The doofus is melting down. For him, the only way out of this corner is either resign, which he can't do that because then he would lose the power of the pardon power, and in all likelihood he would go to jail. And so the White House residence is his last defense against a perp walk, which he knows and fears someday is coming. So what to do? How can he save his own ass? He opens the old dictator playbook. What to do? How do you survive in power? Let me see. Everybody hates me. No real loyalties. What do I do here? I get it. Oh, here. Okay. Start a war. Yeah, that's it. A war with a country presumably weak and far, far away. A war from whose countries their bullets can never reach us. A war maybe we can win. After all, we got Bolton here to call the shots. That, for those of you that don't know, Bolton was the neocon holdover from the last wars. And with a war going on, guess what? I can get Mueller off the front pages. Maybe Rachel Maddow will, change the subject once in a while. Maybe CNN will put on their oversized war helmets and start reporting on real news with real tanks and real jets and real bombs. I'm talking war. And a war I can fucking win. Yeah, with a war, we will finally and truly get the commander and fucking chief, and nobody will mess with me. All of which begs the question, and this is something that I've wondered about, is will the generals and, those 4- and 5-star boys with all the medals on their chest, the chiefs of staff, will they do the PvP's bidding? Will they say, yes, sir, salute, and then go out and start World War III? That's a big question. Now, my hope and prayer is they won't. It's kind of a ironic turnaround from, back in the early 60s when JFK had to stand up to the generals during the Cuban Missile Crisis. There was an opportunity or an example where the civilian authority prevailed, thank God, over the military authority, and war was averted and diplomacy triumphed. We might, in this case, find ourselves in the opposite scenario when the generals will have to stand up to the civilian power. And that is my hope, and that's my prayer. And that's my rant. That's my take on just the atrocity of the moment, because we know there'll be coming one down the pike tomorrow as the rope gets tighter around his neck and the truth grows near. And, I kind of, as we're stuck in this bad political dream that, I can't wake up from. I mean, normally politics is not my first area of interest, but the social moment just demands that we confront and look at, or at least I confront and look at what the hell is going on. Normally I'm interested in boys and girls and relationships and sex and the power dynamic and all, that is my preferred field of play, but the current social moment demands otherwise. And so that's just to the extent how much my consciousness has been affected by the just the political constellation that's out there. It just doesn't seem to allow for me to explore the intimate and the personal. I'm reminded very much of Bogart in Casablanca when he famously said to Ingrid Bergman and Paula Heinrich on the tarmac that the lives of 3 people don't amount to a hill of beans anymore. And by that he meant our intimate selves, the interests of our loves, they have to yield now to maybe a greater cause. And in that case, it was the cause of freedom, the fight against fascism. And maybe we're in that moment now, not with guns, but with words. So this little podcast of mine is my microphone, is my rifle, and the thoughts are my bullets, and out they come. And I'm hopeful that someday these words won't be used against me when I'm actually offered maybe, hopefully, perhaps a real job, and someone goes and finds, well, did you hear what he said in episode number 5 of Bill K's Cockeyed Caravan? That podcast he did that nobody listened to? Well, listen to him. He's a radical. We're going to have to, we can't, no, no, forget it. Fire him. We can't use him. Or he'll have to apologize for what he said. So this is a preemptive non-apology for anything that might be held against me at a later date. And just, I think the only thing I can say is that we're just at a unique moment in our history, a time for when any thinking person really can't talk about anything else. There's just a kind of, we're just surrounded by this massive ball of corruption mixed with incompetence and arrogance, and just animated by an all-consuming mean-spiritedness that has just cast a dark shadow over all of our, psychic well-being, at least mine. I mean, people are just melting down. They're withdrawing into depressive shells. And it's amazing. I grew up in a time when, it was tumultuous, but there was always room for the personal. You could carve that out and cut the other stuff out of your head, but now it just seems like it's harder and harder to do. Maybe it's the internet, our phones reminding us every second what's happening. Maybe it's the 24/7 news cycle. Maybe it's the Rachel Maddow IV that's stuck into my arm 24/7, and we just can't get off of it. My wonder is, when this ends, and it will I actually have an intimate personal life to go back to? Well, I've just become so obsessed by this drama that's unfolding in front of me that now I got to deal with my own life. Well, what happened to that? I forgot about it. Well, I hope that's not the case. But that's what it is. It's just a bad dream that someday, hopefully, we will wake up from. And I think at this moment, it might be instructive to examine how we got to where we are. After all, it's easy to hate the PvP, the billionaire brat boy. It's easy to do that, but it's hard to understand how we got where we are. And here are a few of my keys. Firstly, misplaced values. When you worship false idols, you get false gods. And to my mind, the false idol, at least living here in Hollywood, the false idol that everybody seems to be worshiping, that trumps everything, is celebrity. It's the shallowest. And wealth, celebrity and wealth. That's pretty much amounts to the shallowest definition of success. And when you pick celebrity over accomplishment, insight over popularity, and bombast over fucking everything, this is what you get. And so to me, it's almost biblical. It's Old Testament. We worship false idols, and we have a false god. And let me say this, if the PvP wasn't on a TV show, he couldn't have gotten within 1 million miles of the White House. Of course, celebrity is a stepping stone into political power is nothing new. We've seen it before, but not on this scale. Not this, such a vapid incarnation of celebrity that we have, in front of us. I mean, we have, in California, we had Schwarzenegger. Wasn't my favorite actor, but he used his massive celebrity as a way to put the heel of his boot on Gray Davis's forehead and climb right into the governorship. And before that, Ronald Reagan. He was a well-known actor, a Hollywood contract player, had been a lead in many movies, and was a household name, not only from movies, but from television. And without that, he would not have gotten anywhere near the governorship of California or the presidency. So this obsession over celebrity, this Kardashian-like fetish for just being well-known at the expense of any kind of accomplishment, that, to me, underscores that's sort of the territory that made the current moment that we're in possible. Another thing is make America great again. That term, it seemed to have some resonance to a lot of people. And I wanted to think about what great meant coming out of his mouth. And to my mind, great, America was great, was sort of a code reference to the 50s, the period of the PVP's youth. It was a period when segregation ruled, when whiteness reigned supreme, when the benefits of the expanding U.S. economy were enjoyed by only a few. The American prosperity that vaulted the U.S. into a superpower was not really a shared prosperity. There was segregation across every major sector of U.S. society, and racism prevailed. And I think that hook, that Make America Great Again, has an appeal to a core white constituency that feels like it's under assault. They're not the majority. And so that hook was, had the intuitive power that really, you didn't need to explain it, but people knew what it meant. And that really, was powerful to his impassioned minority. Another issue that sort of made his rise possible is a flawed Constitution. And we celebrate our Constitution as a fantastic document that, famously articulated the checks and balances, the powers, the three branches of government that are all sort of set up to check excesses in the other. But for all of its brilliance, I think it is a clumsy, at least today, document or covenant. The founders were comfortable with articulating the idea of democracy. It's there, right there in the preamble, but they were massively wary of it in practice. After all, it was a document that had to accommodate and explain and allow for slavery. And it enshrined into it the Electoral College, which I might add is now part of Trump University. And the Electoral College was not only installed as a way to preserve slavery, but it also was an institutional buffer against the popular will. I mean, that little institution nullified the results of the popular will in national elections. I think we're probably the only Western democracy that doesn't elect its federal national leaders by popular vote. So that is like these things in the Constitution. They're like the beta version, of the actual institution of democracy, and they don't always work. And unfortunately, the ability to modify, change, rectify, make it a more responsive instrument is well nigh impossible, especially, in this world. I think in the modern times, the Electoral College, because of it's definitely rendered, like my vote in California, less valuable than somebody's vote in Iowa or a swing state, for example. It's allowed for this new emerging tyranny of the minority. And that's what we have. It's not really, in my view, at least in my recent lifetime, with two federal presidents selected in spite of losing the popular vote. So, the checks and balance things, it was a good thing. It's working. But the Electoral College has sort of, it's just not working. It's not the coastal progressive side of our country, which far outnumbers the interior, is now at the mercy of that minority. And somehow it goes back to institutional deficiencies in our founding document. Thirdly, how does this happen? Tribal politics, my guy, my team, right or wrong, the kind of blind loyalty that, people just have. It's my team. I was born this, therefore it's my guys, right or wrong. It reminds me of I'm a Dodger fan, so if the Dodgers are filled with miscreants and goofballs, I still want to see them win. And I think that sort of tribal political allegiance has, it's put us in a bad place. I mean, and these Republicans just are watching this, and they're bound more by their loyalty than by their logic, by their loyalty to their loyalty to party than their logic to than the logic, than the truth that they see. And I mean, they stand by and watch as this disaster unfolds. So I don't know. Those are my three main factors. This kind of blind loyalty. I mean, after all, if you think back to the Civil War, it's not new actually. It just feels inflamed. If you look back to the Civil War, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of poor white people marched to their death by just untold numbers, in the service of a handful of oligarchical slave owners. And why did they do that? I mean, it's tribal. It made no logic. It certainly didn't. Slavery did not benefit the poor white farmer, but off they went, musket on their shoulder, and they were slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands. And that's, in my mind, due to a kind of blind loyalty. And that same loyalty is still with us today. And so there it is, the three major whys. Misplaced values, false idols, you get false gods. I think this idea of this kind of racist nostalgia for a time that exists in memory but maybe didn't really exist, that was the 50s. And then just this Constitution that's clumsy, that doesn't really work in a way in fidelity with the popular will. And we're seeing that play out now at least twice in my lifetime. And all of which has turned everybody that I know into junior Hamlets. We're all pacing back and forth in the castle that's Elsinore. Something is rotten in the heart of Denmark, in the state of Denmark. Well, now it feels like everything is rotten in the current United States. So we're all Hamlets, and that is what it is. And I'm here alone in my movie studio apartment, just a rebel without applause, exploring my creative alternative to not getting booked as a comedian. I'm not on stage live, so I'm here canned in my room, nobody laughing, and I don't have to leave space for laughter, because if it's coming, that'll be on you, not me, and hopefully you'll like it. And once again, thanks for checking in to my latest rant about all things political. I want to get into other things. I want to take you on a journey into the Uberverse. I'm an Uber driver, and we're going to do some shows right from my vehicle. And until then, I'll be signing off and thanking you once again for tuning me in as I